Greetings all, welcome to another session of TESOL Methods and Materials. Today we're going to be talking about interaction and how we can get that interaction and that dynamic in the classroom so that more people will be involved in the communication process, the negotiation process, and they're going to become better learners because of all that interaction. Let's take a first look at what do you mean by interaction? Interaction, according to Brown, is the collaborative exchange of thoughts, feelings, or ideas between two or more people, resulting in a reciprocal effect on each other. Simply put, interaction is people who are communicating back and forth with language in some sense that they're communicating ideas and thoughts, but you've got this interaction, this interchange, this dynamic between people in your classes that is going to create more language use, greater fluency, and hopefully accuracy as well. In your classes, you're going to want to have as much interaction as possible. You want your students to be involved. You want them to be communicating with each other, communicating with you, interacting with materials. The more interaction that they can get, the more they can bounce off of ideas and people, the greater chance they're going to have of learning language because they're involved in this interaction. Now, in several videos before, I talked about the 12 principles in Brown's chapter 4 that talked about cultural and linguistic and social, and cognitive principles for encouraging communicative language learning. We should be using those. For example, the idea of automaticity, getting students to do things on their own without your need, without your help as a teacher, getting someone who's doing it. Oops, that's autonomy. Crap. Okay, let's back up. Okay, interaction principles. We'll start with interaction principles. Okay. One way that we get this interaction is using some of these interaction principles. Now, I talked earlier about the 12 principles in Brown's chapter 4. The linguistic and the cognitive and the socio-cultural components, principles that aid in building interaction. For example, automaticity, trying to get students to take the language that they know in the front of their brain, things that they're consciously thinking about, and pushing them into the back and making them automatic, do things that they do without thinking. And we want to do that with language. One way to establish that more quickly is to get some interaction, right? Automaticity. Automized language users, they can more freely interact. When they're not thinking about what they have to say, they're going to be able to interact better. Intrinsic motivation, next point here, where students are motivated to learn language because they want to learn language. And they're enjoying the process. Those students are going to have more they're going to learn more, they're going to have more interest in the class, and of course you're going to build intrinsic motivation by having more interaction, and that's the point. Last one there, strategic investment. Students who are invested in the course, they see the value of it, they begin to put time and effort in it because they find that it's valuable. They're going to be more interested, they're going to have more interaction, and you're going to build that strategic investment. You're going to build that you're going to build that strategic investment because of interaction. So we want to have interaction in the classroom. We want to get students working and communicating and playing with language as much as possible, both the reading and the writing, but also the listening and the speaking. Now, this means that you as a teacher have a slightly different role than you would from the typical classroom. You as a teacher, you are a controller. You're a controller in the sense that you set the boundaries of an activity, what's going to happen. You're letting them know, okay, we're going to do this activity, these are the rules, and then go. Okay, you give them that right, and then you just take off and you let them do that. You may be a director, and you may be guiding someone to the left or to the right. You may be telling someone to start or to stop, right? You're going to be a manager in the classroom. You're going to manage the materials. You're going to manage the students. You're going to manage, the groups when they're there. You're going to make sure that everything's ready for them. In a sense, you're the guy who's setting up the stage so that they can play on it. You're setting up the playroom so that they can play in it. So you're going to be a manager. You're going to be a facilitator. They're going to come to you with questions. They're going to come to you with a concern, or they don't understand, or what is this word? And you're going to help guide them through that process. You may walk them through it at the beginning as they try to understand the particular activity that you're doing, right? The particular technique that you're using, so that they can learn that. Finally, you're going to be a resource. In some overseas countries, they have these English teacher programs where you go on over and you work in a classroom. And I've often heard teachers say, yeah, that's all I am is a tape recorder. They want to know the English pronunciation, and so that's what they're there for. You're a resource that way. You may be a cultural resource. Someone might ask, well, how do they do it in your country, or how do they what do they mean by this, or what's the role of the parent involved here? So you're going to be a resource for them, both culturally and linguistically, for your students. The goal of all of these ideas for role is to reduce your footprint. You want to be able to sit back and watch them take off and do. Okay? Again, it reminds me of Tom Sawyer as he's painting the fence. And his goal was to get them to paint the fence so that they would be doing it and they would be enjoying it. You as a teacher, your goal is to let them do things. Now, obviously, you have in your head goals and objectives. You have in your head that you want them to learn this grammar and this vocabulary and this reading skill and to be able to gain confidence and get in more motivated to the course. But you're going to do that by allowing them to take over and do things. You'll plan, you'll guide, you'll be the controller, the facilitator, but you want to step back. The smaller your footprint means the bigger their footprint is going to be. And the more they can interact with the language, the better off it's going to be for them. So we want to have more interaction. One way of identifying the interaction that's going on is to do an analysis, is to analyze what you're doing in the classroom. And that's what FLINT is all about, the foreign language interaction analysis. It's a procedure. It's a planned observation of what you do in class, and you can give yourself kind of like a grade, a checklist of all the things that you do or don't do in class. It's a taxonomy for classroom interaction, and it'll describe ways for you to evaluate how well you interact in the class, how well you convey your ideas, as well as how often you're communicating, how in comparison to the students. It's very useful for observing, right, and then improving your classes. Just like you have a syllabus and you try to improve on that syllabus, when you're teaching and you do a FLINT, protocol, you'll be able to improve your teaching as you go. Okay, this type of thing, FLINT encourages an interactive learning climate. Here are some teacher components. You, as a teacher, you're going to be dealing with a number of things. Here are some indirect things that you're going to be dealing with when you're going to be analyzing, right? When you're going to be analyzing what you do here. You're going to deal with feelings that people have. In other words, ways that you can praise, ways that you can encourage, ways that you can help people who are having problems. There you're going to have some type of an indirect influence. You're going to use student ideas, okay? And again, you're going to analyze this. Are you going to be pulling this in? You're going to use a student idea. It's going to increase interaction, right? Because you're doing this. You're going to be asking questions, and the way that you ask questions is going to be analyzed here. It's also going to impact the way interaction is in the classroom. Okay, so we're gonna talk a little more about questions a little later, but asking questions is an excellent way to increase interaction in the classroom. There's direct influence. You can directly give information. Now, that means that you're increasing teacher talk, right? But you're going to give information, and maybe that information or those directions are going to help them and guide them off into something else. That's going to be more direct interaction. You're going to be criticizing student behavior, student responses, okay? You can do this in such a way that you encourage them to do better. Criticizing it is an interesting thing. There was a book written years ago called the 1 minute criticism. I think it was the 1 minute criticism. But it was a way for you to criticize an employee without hurting their feelings. And so we want to be able to criticize, but let this criticism lead to further language learning. We want to help them be better. A teacher of mine in high school used to always say to me, what you have is good, you can make it better. And his phrase would, never settle for anything less than better. What you have is good, let's make it better. And so when I was doing stage work in high school and in college, the teachers would say to me, okay, that's good, now let's make it better. Okay, this what you've done is good, okay, now let's make it better. I took this idea when I started teaching writing. A student would write a paper and I would say, okay, what you have is good here, now let's try to improve this, let's make it better. It's a criticism, yes, but it's a way to encourage students to go on even more and to get more interaction in the classroom. So when you're giving this direct influence of criticizing, make sure that what you're doing is actually going to help them learn. Oh, and by the way, criticizing students will be different. Okay, some people have more difficulty accepting criticism, so I've got to couch it in such a way. Other people, you can be sarcastic with them, or you can make fun of them in a joking way because they can handle that. It's your job as a teacher to notice which students that you can play with, which student can you criticize in public, and they don't mind. Whereas other students, they're not going to be able to do that. You need to notice your students. Okay, let's move on here. Question strategies. In a language classroom, you are going to be asking lots and lots of questions because it's a way to elicit response from them. It's a way to get them to interact in the classroom. Okay, questions, develop question strategies. You should do that to sustain interaction, just as I said. Give students the opportunity and the reason to want to interact. Okay, so maybe, for example, you set up a scenario, you give them a little story, and you ask them questions about it, and they've got to react. And maybe you're upset at the reaction, you know, and you're trying to, well, what about this? And you get them excited about the conversation, and they want to communicate more. I remember doing some situation analysis type of ethical analysis type of activities where there was no right or wrong answer, but it elicited all of this interaction with the students. And I was like, well, why is this person wrong? Why is this person more wrong? And all of a sudden the class just took over, and I get to step back and watch them interact. Now I would facilitate every now and then. They need a word, you know, I'd be a resource for them. But there they were going. It was great to see, because I asked questions that encouraged them to want to interact. Okay, try to initiate a chain reaction. It's fun to see. And you just step back again, like Tom Sawyer painting the fence. He just stepped back and he watched everybody take off. Man, they were all painting the fence. When you're doing activities, you should all try to collect assessment data. Collect data from your students. You know, how well did you like this activity? Was it helpful? Do you think you improved your language? What areas? You know, collect that information so you can analyze what you did, just like the FLINT assessment. But with those questions, you can collect the data and help make your teaching even better. Encourage monitoring and self-reflection. Get your students to write about, well, why was this good? How did this help me? So now they're doing some metacognitive work and thinking about what they're learning and how they're learning. Excellent question strategies means that you're going to have better interaction. And there are a variety of types of question activities. There are display type of questions where you, the teacher, you know the answer. You just want to verify that they know the answer, okay? And so those are quote-unquote lower level type of questions because your students oftentimes know that you know the answer. You simply want to make sure that they know the answer, and so they're less interested. Referential type questions are more interesting because you don't know the answer. And you and your student may go in a discovery together as you're trying to figure out what is the right answer. So you should, again, as I've listed here, regulate the types of questions that you do ask. They suggest that you regulate display questions even more. My thought would be that you don't necessarily regulate them, but that you try to expand to the other questions because they're more interesting, I do believe. At the lower level, you're going to be doing more display questions simply because you're still trying to confirm that they actually can understand the language. I think at the higher, as you go up, and as you have more interest, you can do more referential type questions. All right, so there are a variety of types of questions. There are knowledge-based questions, analysis questions where you can ask them to analyze something. A comprehension question, again, is your display. There's an application where you apply what you've learned to something else. Inference type questions. Oftentimes when I'm teaching someone a movie or teaching them possibly something from the Bible and things that are said that aren't being said, I'm trying to get them to think about what that is. A good example is in the Bible when God is speaking to Cain in the Bible, and God says to Cain, "Where's your brother?" Okay, well, Cain doesn't answer. Cain says, "Well, how should I know?" And then I go back and I ask the students, now, did God actually not know where the brother was? Why is he asking the question? Okay, well, now that's nothing. It's not specific there. It's inferred what's being done there. Okay, so those are neat type questions. There's evaluation type questions, and there are synthesis, putting it all together. Hey, how can we wrap this up type of thing. Variety of questions that you can ask your students. Try to use questions that encourage interaction. Interaction is a great thing. You want your students to, when they leave, they're tired. They're tired of speaking. They're exhausted tired. No, not bored tired. They're tired because they've expounded so much mental and linguistic activity in your class. When they leave, they're like, "Oh man, that was a good experience," and there was a good tire that they had. Question strategies. Other ways to encourage interaction. I've mentioned this before in earlier lectures. Pair work, great thing to do in classes. There are some students who don't like speaking in groups. You have a whole group of, let's just say you've got 15 students in the class, or 20, or some places even have 50 students in the class, and you want one student to stand up and talk, and they're petrified. But if you do pair work, you pair everybody up into smaller things, you can have more interaction. Another good reason to do pair work is that now half of the class, at the very least, is engaged in speaking. Another half is engaged in listening, okay? And there can be negotiations all over the place because you have things in pairs. So I do a lot of pair work for practice sake, for conversation's sake. Now, there are times where we do group work, there are times where we do whole class work, but pair work is a great way to encourage interaction in the classroom. Giving control in the classroom. And I learned this from a professor who talked about using flashcards. And I think I'd mentioned this before in an earlier video, where the teacher, he's dealing with the first graders and he's doing flashcards, and they're trying to, and whoever gets the right flashcard, he hands out the card. So here you go, you can have this card. And then the students, he notices that they're kind of losing their focus, and so he says, "Okay, who wants to be the teacher?" And the kids all raise their hand. "Oh, pick me, pick me." And he hands off the cards to one of the other students, and they become the teacher. Yay! Right? They give control over to this teacher, to the student. Now, who's really in control? Well, the teacher is. The perception, however, is that the students are now in control. And in some sense, they actually are in control. But it changed the whole dynamic. Now they were refocused because there was a student who was now the teacher. They had control. You can do this in your classes. Find ways of giving your students control, so they have interaction. When you're in control, you're more focused. Think about when you're driving, or when you're the passenger and you're going somewhere and you're not paying attention to the roads, you're not paying attention to how you're getting there. All of a sudden you start driving and everything is now focused. You're now looking and trying to figure out, because you're there. Other ways to encourage interaction could be external motivating elements. It could be a variety of things that you're giving them. You want to have some semblance of a routine, but you also want to give new things that have pop up. You want to have that balance. And that's all that I've got for interaction in the classroom. I do hope that your goal is to get these students as involved as possible, and that when they leave, they can't wait to come back because they like the interaction that's there. Interaction is a very strong motivating factor, so I would encourage you to do that. If you do have any questions about interaction in the classroom, please let me know, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.